Hello and welcome into another episode of the Gamecock Central podcast, title pending. If you guys have any amazingly brilliant suggestions, let us know on Twitter or in the thread here on Gamecock Central. But this is going to be a regular thing. It's me, Pearson Fowler. If you are not used to hearing my voice on Gamecock Central, you can find me on 107.5 The Game between 12 and 1 on weekdays. 107.5 The Game, the home of the Gamecocks. And here with me, as always, now going forward, Wes Mitchell and Chris Clark, whom you know and love and read a lot and do brilliantly. And Chris, even though he's wearing a Golden State hat, I say all these nice things about you. Chris, why are you wearing the Golden State hat?
At the beach in one of those stores, Lids or, something like that down there at one of the outlets or whatever. I thought it was a cool looking hat. And so somebody bought it for me.
It is sharp.
Family.
It's got that kind of like denim-y kind of texture, but it's gray. It's nice. I don't like that it's a Golden State hat, but it is
I'm not a Golden State fan. I thought it was a cool hat.
Right,
it's like I guess it would be the equivalent of an alternate uniform.
I like that.
Our guy Kevin Roche will like it.
What is your normal uniform?
This, but no hat normally.
Y'all are both wearing
not
hats.
A flat bill.
I'm not wearing a hat. I'm not a hat person because it messes up my hair, which is curly, and so it gets flat on the top, so I can't wear hats. But maybe we'll just call this podcast Hats. Or if you guys have a better idea, again, just let us know.
I think somebody out there can come up with something better.
We'll have something workshop, but regardless of what the title is, this is going to be a fixture. It's me, it's Chris, it's Wes, talking about all of the biggest Gamecock headlines this week. South Carolina 4-0 in the SEC, winning on the road against Vanderbilt last night. We'll get to that in just a minute, but want to get started with a couple of quick football notes. First of all, guys, either of you hearing anything on the defensive line front? It seemed like South Carolina's coaching staff decisions were coming pretty quickly after a couple of raises and extensions were announced, and then Thomas Brown hired as the running back coach, but it's taken a little bit longer to get the defensive line coach situated.
One of the names that has really percolated, a name that in which there's been mutual interest, is Marion Hobby, most recently Jacksonville Jaguars defensive line coach in the NFL, former Clemson coach, 2 stints at Clemson, also Duke, Ole Miss under David Cutcliffe, really highly regarded developer. Knows the recruiting territory, somebody that Will Muschamp thinks highly of. So, again, like Pearson said, just waiting to hear, maybe what that situation is going to hold. Ideally, you'd like to have somebody in for the weekend, given that they've got a bunch of juniors coming in this weekend. They've got some official visitors, including a 4-star defensive tackle, Jaquez Sorrells, coming in for an official. But also, at the same time, I'm sure Muschamp's not going to rush the process.
Yeah, I think it sounds like there's a lot of interest from a lot of coaches that have some, diverse backgrounds. And, I think you look at Hobby, you look at the job he's done at pass stops, you look at the NFL experience. And, I think when you look at these hires that Muschamp has made since his time, most of the guys have a history of bringing in big-time prospects. Most of them have either some type of SEC or, in this case, NFL experience on their resume. And really, they're all guys that have something to sell. And I think, you talk about recruiting, you talk about the fact that the guy has to be able to present himself to prospects and to parents and stuff like that. But also, all these guys, I think, have the resume that you can sell to the prospects and their parents. And, I think if it ends up being Hobby, that's a guy who has a history not just, in the NFL, but right here in the state of South Carolina, which I think helps. And then you look at some of the other names that are out there, with Reynolds or with John Scott and guys like that. I think that you can sort of see the direction Muschamp wants to take. But right now, it's been interesting. And the thing I like about this podcast, so we can maybe give a little background on how, it is following this type stuff. It's been interesting how different the D-line hire has been to follow compared to the Thomas Brown hire, which was just completely straightforward, very, very easy to follow. There was one name, and then it was done. And this one has, Chris, had, I think, a few more turns trying to follow what's really going on.
Definitely. The Thomas Brown thing, like you said, pretty straightforward. There was an opportunity, and it came together pretty quickly where there was a position on the team that South Carolina, with Will Muschamp, wanted to upgrade. You get a chance, a coach that's available with ties to another coach, who's Brian McClendon, a guy who played with Thomas Brown, coached with him at Georgia. So there's obviously a prior connection, a guy he knows well, he works with well, and it was a chance to keep a good recruiter on staff in Bobby Bentley, and also add a coach in Thomas Brown with a good track record and a good recruiting reputation too. So that one made a lot of sense. Whereas, now it's been known for a while that South Carolina would have a change on the defensive line, able to go and sort of cast a little bit of a wider net and try to find some guys to focus on and see where the chips may fall.
Chris, you mentioned something interesting a little bit ago that I want to come back to. There's a balance when you are reworking your staff. And for South Carolina, you mentioned they have some defensive players coming in on official visits this weekend, and you don't want them to come in and not have their point of contact. But the other side of that, as you mentioned, you don't want to rush a hire like this. You want to make sure you get the right guy. So what's the balance between making sure you get the right guy, but also having these kids be assured that whoever you get, they're going to get along with, they're going to know, they're going to respect, they're going to have a good relationship with? Because I think that's important in a lot of these guys' recruitment.
That's a great question. I mean, I think with Will Muschamp, looking at Sorrells, for example, that's the guy who I think we're referring to for this weekend. That's a prospect that Will Muschamp and defensive coordinator Travaris Robinson have really done the lion's share of the work with. So Muschamp, especially in these last few weeks, knowing that there was going to be a change on the staff, they really dug in, and he's really, and you can say that about several defensive linemen from recently, where Rick Sandage was mainly, Bobby Bentley and Muschamp and Travaris Robinson, and Zach Pickens. Muschamp was so huge in, and then Mike Peterson and Travaris Robinson. But Muschamp, typically with a lot of these top targets, has so much involvement, and that's a good strategy. Now, with a guy like Sorrells, even if they didn't have a guy in place this coming weekend, can still sell him on all the other aspects of the program, maybe give him an idea of what they're looking to go get or where things stand. Then you have the new ops building, things of that nature that you can sell him on, and he can go back and look at his track record. Look, I've always had defensive line coaches, for the most part, that have been productive, that have been good recruiters, so I'm going to hire a good candidate.
And being able to walk through that ops building is no doubt going to help. The videos that have been circulating on Twitter are extraordinary. And Chris, you actually got to walk through there last weekend, right?
Yeah, I took a quick look, and it was really impressive. We're going to have a full media tour on February 4th when everything's done. I got to see like a little bit of the area around there, and I think people are going to be impressed.
Did you get a haircut?
No, I did not get a haircut.
Okay, I guess the
my understanding the hat actually.
Yeah,
right.
He needs a.
My understanding the haircut, the barber shop apparently is actually attached to the locker room. Like when you walk in the locker room, it's right near there. So. But it's going to be a neat area. They're still working on some things in there, and I imagine before we get the full media tour, they're going to have everything pretty situated. But it's something that the coaches and the players are still able to utilize right now, and they're going to start showing it off this coming weekend to a bunch of juniors that are going to be in town the next 3 weekends, really.
Yeah, the players are really excited about it. And the guy we just talked about, Sorrells, obviously the big name, someone that I think people have been keeping an eye on for a while. Who are some of the other guys that are going to be here this weekend, and what should we expect out of their visits?
Well, I think the other guy to watch is DeQuanteus Watts, who is the big-time cornerback South Carolina's been on for a while now. Brian McClendon had his in-home. We're recording this on Thursday, so that was yesterday, Wednesday. A guy they've been on for a while. I guess towards the end of the year, they sort of made a big move on him and brought him in for an unofficial visit. They'll get him in on the official this weekend, and then a ton of juniors are coming in, and that's sort of where we are now. I mean, junior days always, not I shouldn't say always, but for the last few years, they were already doing junior days this time of the year, but especially now when you have the majority of your 2019 class signed, I mean, the focus becomes underclassmen, and we're talking 2020 guys, we're talking 2021s, and, you do everything you can to go ahead and get them in. I believe, Chris, you kind of been working on a list there on Gamecock Central. You want to name a few of the guys?
Yeah, it's hard to narrow it. A lot of good ones, so it's hard to narrow it down. I mean, linebacker's a position people have talked about a lot. Mm-hmm. So a couple from North Carolina, Trent Simpson, who has really blown up lately. Georgia, Tennessee offered in the past few days. South Carolina's been in there early. Mo Kaba, who's another linebacker that I think could really see his stock rise this spring and summer, is coming in. Then you got some guys, offensive lineman Avery Jernigan, Micah Morris, who's a big-time offensive lineman from Georgia in the 21 class. Alex Huntley from down the road in Hammond, Kedrick Bingley-Jones out of North Carolina, who's a 4-star who just decommitted from Florida, among others. I mean, but a lot of big-time talent coming in.
Yeah, and, I think that's what I'm most curious about. And when they take these visits, you're always kind of looking for, when we do interviews with kids, we're always like looking for a focus. And sometimes, I mean, let's be honest, some of the interviews are just as cookie cutter as they could be. Did you have a good time? Yeah, I had a good time. I enjoyed the atmosphere. I like the coaches. this is how coach wants to use me. And it's hard sometimes to find an actual focus on a recruiting article. But this week and next weekend and the week after, the ops building, I'm interested to see the reaction from these prospects, because these are, like Chris said, these are all big-time prospects. They're taking visits to other schools as well. The Bingley Jones kid who's from North Carolina was committed to Florida. He was committed to a major SEC program. I'm curious to hear the reactions from these prospects when they start to compare the ops building to what they've seen at other major programs. So I think the next few weeks, I'd imagine that's going to be the focus of the junior days. They'll do all the normal stuff, but you literally just opened this thing. So that's going to be the primary thing you're showing off, and that's probably going to be the focus, I think, on our interviews as well.
And we already heard Thomas Brown say that it's as nice a facility as he's seen anywhere in the country. A guy that has played at the top level, that's coached at the top level, that has seen a lot of nice facilities, a lot of nice programs around the country. So certainly means a lot to hear that from him. One thing that I'm just sort of personally curious about. So, we have guys that visit obviously throughout the course of the season, and a lot of times they'll come on game weeks because you want them to sit in there and to get the atmosphere of a game day. And, regardless of how the game goes, they get to see 2001, they get to see the pyrotechnics as long as those are working correctly. They get to see the actual game day atmosphere. But for the guys that come in the off season, one, is it really just a scheduling issue where they weren't able to get those guys in, during the season? Or, is there sort of a separate itinerary with those guys that they bring in after the season that don't necessarily have a game to go to?
I don't know about you, Chris, but I kind of think you almost prefer to have the guys come on the official when there's not a game. You get them in for an unofficial. Ideally, if it's someone who's close enough to travel, you get them in unofficially for the game, let them check out the game, see the locker room atmosphere, see the coaches for a minute or, right before the game, but then your focus as a program is on winning that football game. So then official visit weekend, if you can do it after the season, you really have the opportunity to show everything about the program. You have the chance to put your sole focus as a coaching staff on making sure that not just the kid, but mama and daddy. I think the official visits are just as much about the parents getting all their questions answered. It's about the kids having fun and seeing Muschamp's house and eating. All the kids always talk about the food and what do they get to eat and stuff like that. But for mama and daddy, a lot of times, or coach, it's about answering those final questions. So when your focus is on the official visit only, then I think that lends itself to a more complete experience.
And I think if you get a prospect, this isn't like the magic bullet, but if you can get a guy on campus like 3 to 4 times in various capacities, various types of visits, I think that really enhances your chances. I think back to last class, there are a lot of guys that fit this bill. That one that came to my mind was Ja'Kai Moore. Mm-hmm. He was on campus in the spring, I think, for a junior day, and they got to see facilities and hang out and do all that type of stuff. So that's sort of what some of these 20 and 21 prospects are going to be doing. He came in the summer, worked out with Eric Wolford, so he got a feel for what it would be like to work with his future coach, got to see some other things. Then he was back. He took an official visit in the spring, too. Mm-hmm. So he took advantage of that spring official visit. His mom got to see the academics, all that. He came back in the summer, and then he returned for a game, right? So
right, yeah.
He got to see the game atmosphere. So they touched on all those different things with Ja'Kai, and I think that really helped out. So if you can get a guy to campus several times and give them those different types of experiences, I think that helps.
Obviously, you have to have the quality visits, too. It can't just be the number, but it seems like what y'all are saying is it's just about as many different points of contact, as many different contexts in which you can get these guys on campus is going to help solidify your, I guess, security with that school. One more quick thing. You guys mentioned some of the bigger juniors that are coming here that, are going to be headliners of the class, but any guys that you have watched that you have your eye on that could be some sleepers, or maybe someone that isn't super high on South Carolina right now that they'll have a chance to really turn into a Carolina commit this weekend?
Do you have a guy on commit watch at this point?
You never know. Sometimes going into these visits, you have an idea. There aren't any that we know of that are, say, imminent, but it's always possible. For me, I think about a guy, not necessarily who may commit, but a guy like Avery Jernigan, who's an offensive lineman out of Georgia, who's really liked Auburn and South Carolina, and he's already been on campus several times. Sort of that same trajectory. He's taken a junior day visit in the past. He's been on campus, worked out in camp. I think this weekend, if he has another good visit, could really solidify South Carolina's stance. I don't know that he'll commit per se, but he's one that stands out.
Well, I think it's always interesting. You have, for some of these guys, like this will be their first experience with South Carolina. And so they're like what you would say sort of stage one of the recruiting process, as far as South Carolina is concerned anyway. And then you have these other guys who have maybe been on the recruiting radar for a long time and have been on campus and have taken visits. And, I mean, and then even some, Will Shipley, 2021 kid, who's a running back / wide receiver type, do-it-all athlete. I mean, he's already taken in, camp with South Carolina. He was at practice during the bowl week, and just now he's going to check out a junior day. So he's already sort of, the process is, it's early for him, but it's already moving right along. So, I mean, you mentioned Kedrick Bingley Jones, who has been committed to Florida, just recently decommitted, but I think he camped with South Carolina last year. I know he was at 7-on-7, I think, playing linebacker maybe.
Yep, he
was. Has been in for games already. And, so it's different points of the process for different kids. And some of them want to just get it over with. And then you inevitably will have the guys that have no plans right now of committing, but just will get there and get blown away and be like, the ops building's amazing, whatever it may be, and then just say, I'm going to commit. And then for those guys, a lot of times it becomes a situation where you maybe have to work harder to hold on to those guys than the kid who's decided beforehand, hey, I'm going to commit during this timetable, I think.
This is great for me because really my frame of reference for recruiting is NCAA football, and you always want to schedule all your official visits for like the big games, and you don't do as much in the off season. So it's,
you mean
it's good to get
the video game?
Yeah,
which doesn't exist anymore.
I know, RIP, which is it's really terrible, unfortunately. But that's my frame of reference, so it's good to get the actual insights, the ins and outs of how this works. Before we get out of here, guys, South Carolina, big winner, 74-71 in Nashville over Vanderbilt last night. They keep it rolling, 4-0 in the SEC, and most importantly, doing it in just absolutely heart-stopping fashion. They continue to win close games, whether it was buzzer beater in Florida, overtime win against Mississippi State, or trailing most of the game against Vanderbilt last night, somehow pull out the win. You guys are close to the program. What are they putting in the water in the locker room?
I mean, in bizarre fashion, too. I mean, you look at Chris Silva had, 2 points in the game?
And fouled out.
And fouled out, yeah. For them to win how they're winning is the most impressive. And, man, you look at Keyshawn Bryant. I thought, just from what you heard about the kid and read about him, all anybody talked about was his athleticism, which rightfully so. You see him. There was a play where he almost jumped over Chris Silva. I don't know if y'all saw that. He's going for – and Chris Silva had to catch him, which Chris Silva caught him, put him on the ground, and then went for the rebound, which was crazy. But I thought, okay, this is going to be that athletic kid who comes in, but it's going to take 2-3 years to try to develop his skill set. And then you look at him, you're like, this kid has an actual basketball skill set too. He made a play against Missouri where, late in the game, in the lane, where he's going in almost out of control, but then pulls up, goes around the guy as opposed to hitting him, and finger rolls the ball in. And I said, so, okay, this guy has a skill set. He continues to show that. And so I think you look at him, you look at A.J. Lawson, and the young guys continue to grow up and to win a game on the road. And they kept putting the graphic up. They hadn't won there since March 2010.
March 6th, 2010, yep.
Insane. So find a way to win is pretty amazing. And this run, I mean, it just goes to show you, don't ever completely count out a Frank Martin basketball team. Because even the people who said, even the people who were our, quote, I'll say it, our sunshine pumpers, on Gamecock Central, nobody was predicting 4-0. Like, even if you believed, okay, give Frank Martin time, give him a chance to sort of rebuild this roster, even if you believe that, if you're saying you predicted 4-0, you are a liar. So this has been awesome for them, and I think they deserve a ton of credit for sticking it out and staying the course.
Yeah, and it's been somebody different every game. These last few games, somebody different stepped up. Hassani Gravitt's been huge. I mean, what did he have, 17 in the second half? I know at one point he had 15. I think he made a couple free throws. The tech that Vandy had was really the turning point.
Ooh, yeah.
Terrible play by their guy. But, I mean, he made a big corner three. He drew that tech, made a big corner three, made some free throws at the end after he got a rebound. So, I mean, yeah, it was a huge win for them. Not that Vandy's a great basketball team, but a tough place to win. And anytime you get a conference win, we knew it was going to be a grind this season. So these are the type of games that they needed to win to get back on track.
Couple close wins on the road. It's been exciting, and I think has given people a lot of anxiety and probably shaved even a couple years off of people's lives, but ultimately has been really fun. All right, thanks, guys. We'll be back here every Thursday. The Gamecock Central podcast, title pending, for Wes Mitchell and Chris Clark. I'm Pearson Fowler. You can catch me weekdays from 12 to 1 on 107.5 The Game. And thanks again for listening to the Gamecock Central podcast. Like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Stitcher, SoundCloud, anywhere like that. We'll see you next week.